9-year-old Ethan and his 7-year-old sister Lily were often left alone at home, though never for too long. Their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Patrick, were hard-working professionals trying their best to provide for their family. The children had grown used to entertaining themselves with board games, coloring books, and watching their favorite cartoons. "Lily, I'm bored," Ethan called out one afternoon, sprawled across the living room couch. "Want to play something?" Lily looked up from her coloring book, her pigtails swaying as she shook her head. "I'm finishing my rainbow unicorn, brother. Look how pretty it is." The house felt especially quiet that day. Their mother had rushed out early for an important meeting, barely having time to pour them cereal for breakfast. Their father had left even earlier, promising to be home for dinner, but looking stressed about a big project deadline. "I wish Mum and Dad could stay home more," Lily said softly, putting down her crayon. "Remember when we used to have picnics in the backyard every Sunday?" Ethan nodded, remembering those happy times. "And Dad would pretend to be a monster, chasing us around the garden." As the afternoon wore on, the siblings tried to keep themselves busy. They played board games, built a fort with blankets, and watched their favorite cartoon shows. But something was missing, the warmth and attention of their parents. That evening, when Mrs. Patrick came home briefly to check on them, Lily approached her mother hesitantly. "Mum, can I talk to you?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Mrs. Patrick was juggling phone calls and checking her work emails. "Not now, sweetie. I'm in a hurry. I need to get back to the office for an important meeting." "But Mom..." Lily's voice trailed off as her mother rushed around gathering documents. "Later, darling. Be a good girl, all right?" Mrs. Patrick called out as she headed for the door, her mind already on her next meeting. Lily stood there, watching the door close, feeling invisible in her own home. She retreated to her room, hugging her favorite stuffed elephant close. All she wanted was for her mother to listen, to spend time with her like they used to. The next day, feeling lonely and needing someone to talk to, Lily went to visit their kind neighbor, Aunt Grace. Though not really their aunt, Grace had always been there for the Patrick children, offering cookies and a listening ear whenever they needed it. "What's wrong, little one?" Aunt Grace asked, noticing Lily's sad expression. She knelt down to meet the child at eye level. Lily's lower lip trembled. "I miss Mom and Dad. They're always so busy now." Aunt Grace wrapped Lily in a warm hug. "Oh, sweetheart, sometimes grown-ups get caught up in their work and forget what's most important. Would you like to talk about it?" For the next hour, Lily sat in Aunt Grace's cozy kitchen, sipping hot chocolate with mini marshmallows and sharing her feelings. She talked about how lonely she and Ethan felt, how they missed their family dinners and weekend activities. "You know what?" Aunt Grace said thoughtfully. "Sometimes parents need a little reminder about what matters most. Would you like me to talk to your mom and dad?" Lily nodded gratefully, feeling a little lighter having shared her worries with someone who truly listened. That evening, Aunt Grace paid a visit to the Patrick household. She found Mrs. Patrick in the kitchen, hastily preparing a quick dinner while taking work calls. "Sarah," Aunt Grace said gently, using Mrs. Patrick's first name, "we need to talk about the children." Mrs. Patrick looked up, surprised by the serious tone in her neighbor's voice. "Is everything okay? Did something happen?" "Your children are wonderful, but they're missing their parents," Aunt Grace explained carefully. "Today, Lily came to me because she needed someone to talk to. She and Ethan are feeling lonely." The words hit Mrs. Patrick hard. She sat down at the kitchen table, her work calls forgotten. I had no idea they were feeling this way. We're working so hard to give them a good life." "I know you are," Aunt Grace said kindly, "but what they need most right now is your presence, your attention. Material things can't replace the love and time of their parents." Mrs. Patrick sat quietly for a moment, letting Aunt Grace's words sink in. Her phone buzzed with another work notification, but for the first time in months, she didn't reach for it immediately. "James needs to hear this too," she said, referring to her husband. "Could you stay for dinner, Grace? Help me talk to him?" Just then, the front door opened, and Mr. Patrick's tired voice called out, "I'm home." Ethan and Lily's excited footsteps thundered down the hallway. "Daddy!" Lily launched herself into his arms while Ethan hung back, trying to act cool but clearly happy to see his father. "Hey, princess." Hey, sport! Mr. Patrick hugged them both, though his briefcase and phone were still in his hands. I need to make a few calls, but I'll be right back. James, Mrs. Patrick interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. The calls can wait. We need to have a family meeting. Aunt Grace is here, and there's something important we need to discuss. The children sat at the dining table, while Aunt Grace helped Mrs. Patrick prepare a simple dinner of spaghetti and meatballs. The kitchen filled with the warm aroma of garlic bread, and for the first time in weeks, the whole family sat down together. Lily came to see me today, Aunt Grace began carefully, looking at both parents. She and Ethan have been feeling a bit lonely. Ethan's eyes widened. You went to Aunt Grace's house without me? I just needed someone to talk to, Lily mumbled, looking down at her plate. Mr. Patrick put down his fork. Talk about what, sweetheart? About how you and Mom are never home anymore, Ethan blurted out before Lily could answer. We never do anything fun together like we used to. You're always on your phones or at work or saying not now and maybe later, Lily added quietly. Mrs. Patrick reached across the table and took her daughter's small hand. Oh, honey, we had no idea you were feeling this way. Both of you, she added, looking at Ethan. We've been working so hard because we want to give you both the best life possible, Mr. Patrick explained. But maybe we've forgotten what the best life really means. It means being together, Lily said simply, like we are now. Aunt Grace smiled warmly, out of the mouths of babes. That evening marked a turning point for the Patrick family. After dinner, instead of rushing back to their laptops and phones, the parents sat with their children in the living room. They played Monopoly Junior, and for the first time in months, the house was filled with genuine laughter. Starting tomorrow, Mr. Patrick announced as he helped Lily count her Monopoly money, we're going to make some changes. Mrs. Patrick nodded. I'll talk to my boss about adjusting my hours. Maybe I can work from home 2 days a week. And I can shift my meetings to start later so I can have breakfast with you kids, Mr. Patrick added. No more rushed cereal in the morning. Ethan looked skeptical. You promise? Pinky promise, both parents said in unison, holding out their little fingers to their children. The next few weeks weren't perfect, but the Patricks stayed true to their word. Mrs. Patrick started working from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays, taking her lunch breaks to help the children with their homework or just listen to their stories about school. Mr. Patrick made it a point to be home for dinner at least 4 nights a week. He set up a no-phone zone at the dinner table, and gradually the family began to reconnect. They shared stories about their days, made plans for the weekend, and most importantly, listened to each other. One Saturday morning, about a month after their family meeting, Lily woke up to the smell of pancakes wafting up from the kitchen. She rushed downstairs to find her father in an apron, attempting to flip a pancake, while her mother recorded the moment on her phone. Not for work, but for their family memories. Dad, you're making breakfast. Lily couldn't believe her eyes. Sure am, princess. Your mother's been teaching me. Want to help? Soon Ethan joined them, and the kitchen became a happy mess of flour, maple syrup, and laughter. As they sat down to enjoy their slightly misshapen but love-filled breakfast, Lily looked around at her family with contentment. Mom, Dad, she said between bites of syrupy goodness. Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for listening. Mrs. Patrick felt tears welling up in her eyes as she reached over to squeeze her daughter's hand. Thank you for speaking up, honey. Sometimes parents need a little reminder about what's truly important. Later that day, the family visited Aunt Grace with a fresh batch of cookies they'd baked together. As the children played in her garden, the adults sat on the porch watching them. You know, Aunt Grace said, sipping her tea, this is what childhood should be. Not expensive toys or fancy vacations, just the security of knowing your parents are there for you. Mr. and Mrs. Patrick exchanged glances, remembering how close they'd come to losing sight of that simple truth. Their careers were still important, but they'd found a better balance. They'd remembered that the most valuable gift they could give their children was their time and attention.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. Kindly click the subscribe button, like, comment, and share this video. Watch out for more intriguing and eye-catching videos from your favorite YouTube channel.